Almost anything important that happened in our village was marked by a cake, and my father made most of them. Like a living calendar, our bakery reflected all the seasons and the great festivals, and even the turning of the day from morning bread through to afternoon buns. The work started early and ended late, and involved a constant assault on your senses. The whine of the big mixing machines, the clatter of the high trolleys which brought batches hot from the oven out to the wrapping room, the giddy smell of yeast bread, and the fat aroma of perfectly finished Victoria sponges. People would bring all their happy times to our front door. Anniversaries, christenings, birthdays, and, of course, weddings. A shy young woman and her more determined mother would come to order the cake, and my father would bring them in for a consultation. In truth, he didn't give them much choice. They could have square or round, 2 or 3 tier cakes, but after that he was a Puritan. Wedding cakes were white, and only white, with silver decorations. No little bride or groom figures ever climbed aboard his cakes. They were crowned instead by a silver vase with a virginal trail of lily of the valley, and they were delicately piped all over with interlacing patterns copied from the Book of Kells, honestly. He iced at night when it was quiet. As a child, I'd be drawn across the yard towards that pool of light from the bakery window. I'd peep in, and there he'd be, perched on a high stool like a monk over his manuscript, piping his pure white scrolls. The finished cakes were stunningly beautiful, the work of a master confectioner. How anybody could ever bear to eat them, I never knew. But his real masterpiece was the basic cake for all these special occasions, for weddings, for Easter, most of all for Christmas. It was his good fruit cake. It was expensive to make, and local people preferred his slab fruit cake, which was bigger and cheaper. The country people likes the bulk, Mr. O'Leary, one shopkeeper told him. They didn't know what they were missing. His more sophisticated customers, like Leverett and Fry's in Carlow, and Jacobs in New Ross, loved the cake, and a group of Dublin friends wanted to invest in a project which would tin it and export it to America. But that sounded too big and industrial and anonymous for my dad. He preferred to make all his good fruits himself, and maybe that's why they were so good. They were light. He didn't believe in dark treacle-bound fruitcakes. His cake was the colour of pale, pale amber and tasted of butter, because that's what it was made with. Real butter and fresh eggs and a modest amount of soaked sultanas and cherries. Before the tins went into the oven, they were protected like Edwardian ladies against the sun. 2 layers of greaseproof paper inside, 4 layers of brown paper outside, and a cardboard hat on the top. He cooked the cakes fast and hot, and then turned off the oven and left them sitting there for hours, pickling in one another's richness. I can still remember the smell when we'd finally opened the oven. It was like breathing ecstasy. The cakes then had a maturing period. They were stored for about 4 weeks, each wrapped in greaseproof paper, stacked on shelves, and dated so they wouldn't be sold too early. When the time was right, he'd ceremoniously carry one of the batch into my mother, and it would be cut, always with a thin-bladed knife, never a serrated bread knife. "Do not use a saw," he would rasp, near my cake. He would cut it across the middle like a cheese, and that was its consistency, like a good cheddar, moist and firm without crumbs. A long, thin slice, the full width of the cake would be extracted, and then the remaining halves of the cake would be pushed together again and rewrapped. The long slice would be cut into fingers, and we'd all clamour for a piece, but we'd have to wait. Heads together, my mother and father would smell it, feel it, and taste it, slowly, thoughtfully, until at last she would look at him and nod. Good man, good work, good fruits.